Good evening. Welcome to the QCIS channel. We're on this channel, you get a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is construction, engineering, and inspection. Now, I'm going to present a PowerPoint. It's not mine, but it gives you insights on what goes on, particularly if you are working for a state Department of Transportation. Now, I've worked for a couple of state departments of transportations. I've worked for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, and I also work for the Indiana Department of Transportation. And currently, I'm with the city of Indianapolis in their Public Works Department, which a long time ago cities used to have their own DOTs. Some of them do. I know New York City has the New York City Department of Transportation. Chicago has the Chicago Department of Transportation. I know Baltimore has Baltimore Department of Transportation. DC has DC Department of Transportation. Indiana, well, Indianapolis used to have the Indianapolis Department of Transportation. Then they changed it over to Public Works. Now, basically, when we get into construction engineering and inspection, we're talking about the engineers are basically, they could be project managers or area engineers or transportation managers. It depends on whether you have your PE or if you went up the ranks as a inspector. And you have your inspectors, which are your technicians. Now, some states, your technicians are required to do testing. Here in Indiana, the inspectors are required to run the LWD, which is a lightweight deflectometer. I typically do not like it because it doesn't produce compaction. All it does is just give you a deflection. Like if I have a straight line, it's a blow count, and your deflection is going to be in millimeters. Now, this is not about the LWD or the nuclear density gauge. This is basically the concepts of what goes on in construction, engineering, and inspection. Now, I brought this up because construction is a large field. I mean, within construction, you have your, I call it your residential construction. You also have your industrial construction. You have your environmental construction. You have what we call your heavy construction. And then there's commercial construction. Those are the big areas of construction. Now, each career is different. Now, I will say this. With construction, you do not need a college degree, and that depends on where you're going to go. However, I say this, without a college degree in engineering or even construction management, it's going to take you a longer time and you will have the most competition unless you can get some types of certifications. Now, if you're working on, let's say, public infrastructure projects, one of the certifications that I would get, and it's under the American Public Water Association. And if you want to take the test, if you have to be a member, which the test is $95 if you're a member. If you're not a member, it's $145. Now, the CPII exam, once you pass that, you become what we call a CPII inspector. Now, what is CPII? CPII is a certified public infrastructure inspector. Now, sit back and close your eyes. there was a time where inspectors rose up from the technician route. Now, these are the individuals that either went to school for a 2-year degree or they just gained experience from starting as an entry level technician. Now, when I was in Maryland, technicians had certifications. They had WASL, which is the Washington Area Council for Engineering Laboratories, had it in soil, concrete. There's also ACI, basically field grade 1. There's laboratory. There's all kinds of certifications. There's NICET. Now, I will say this, so you will understand this engineering and inspection field within construction. It is cutthroat. I'm going to tell you why. There is a lot of competition. And I'm going to tell you why there's a lot of competition. Well, there's a lot of competition because when you look at the consulting companies out there, they're bidding for the same work, particularly if it is in the government sector. See, a lot of your transportation or your interstate routes or your US routes and your state routes are done by the government. The government, we're talking about the state. Now, the state is allocated money from the federal government, the FHWA. Now, there are some contracts like local public contracts or municipal contracts that are 80-20. The city might provide 20% and the state provides 80%. But with that being stated, when you are working on public infrastructure, you're working on roads, you're working on bridges, anything that deals with, in every city, a public works department. If you're working for the state, a state Department of Transportation, and even the federal highway administration, particularly if you're working for the what we call the Western Federal Lands District, the Central Federal Lands District, and the Eastern Federal Lands District. Matter of fact, I actually got hired. I didn't take the job because it was in Colorado. But basically, you do the same thing. So I don't want to give a bunch of word salad here. I just want to tell you, about this field in length and what you need to get in this field. Now, this field has a lot of people. Now, let me tell you how you shore up your competition, though. Okay. I would say, now this is just my biased opinion here, I would actually start off and get either an engineering or an engineering technology degree. Why did I say that? Because if you have engineering or engineering technology, now the difference between engineering is theoretical, where engineering technology is application, but there are overlaps within those two areas. But when you have engineering behind your name, before you take any certification, the first certification you need to go for is what we call the FE, and then you get your PE. You see, one thing about engineers, particularly civil engineers, and even architects or landscape architects or interior designers, when you are dealing with some type of infrastructure, you can become very stifled without certifications. That's the gist of it, because you needed this introduction on what it is. Now, what does a construction inspector do? Basically, a construction inspector reads the plans, specifications, they take measurements, they calculate quantities for payments, and they do daily reports. And they're basically observing the contractor's work to make sure that the contractor is building the project according to plans and specifications. In other words, the inspector is managing the plight of that contract, where the person in charge, which could be an IIC, an inspector in charge, that's what we call them in Pennsylvania, or the PEPS, project engineer, project supervisor, that's what they call them in Indiana. In Indianapolis, where I work, they call them RPRs, the representative project or the resident project representative. They're basically overseeing the project, but they have a lot of administrative duties that they must do. They have to make the payments, and that's by cutting the estimate. They're the ones that put in the change orders. They're the ones that deal with the problems from the contractor. They're the ones that set up all your pre-con meetings or your progress meetings. They're the ones that actually approve all of the inspectors' daily reports. They're the ones that are in the field. Now, they may do some inspection, but they have a lot of administrative work to do. Now, that being said, let's get into some construction engineering and inspection. Now, again, this is not my work, but I'm just presenting it to you. This is from the Louisiana Department of Transportation. It's called Construction Engineering and Inspection. This is by Mike Vosberg, Headquarters Construction Division, Chief Construction Engineer. Now, as I put it out there before, what is construction engineering and inspection? Well, CE&I. It is the administration of the construction project, engineering and inspection. And what's involved with that is this: it ensures quality work by the contractor by making timely inspections, issuing clear instructions, ensuring early sampling and testing of materials, promptly furnishing data needed by the contractor, promptly resolving conflicts, and you have to be decisive, and the timely preparation of payment estimates and, of course, change orders. Now, how is CE&I determined? Well, project on a non-state route, entity inspects using in-house personnel, and they usually hire a consultant with entity funds. Consultant obtained through DOTD's consultant selection process. Now, every state, because most state DOTs don't have enough inspectors, so they hire consultants. The agenda. This is an overview. Project setup, pre-construction conference, construction, and project closeout. Again, this is by the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, DOTD. Question: when should a project setup meeting be held? A, before the project is bid. B, prior to the pre-construction meeting. C, after the pre-construction meeting. Well, we're talking about setting up a project. So, the pre-construction meeting takes place after the contract has already been bid. So you're going to throw that question out. So that means you're not going to set up a project setup meeting before the pre-con meeting. So if you don't set it up before the pre-con meeting, that means you're not going to set it up after the pre-con meeting. So basically, you're going to set up the project before it is bid. Purpose of this section is to help local public agencies, or we call them LPA, And that's what we have here, LPAs, the project engineer, and the responsible charge to understand the task required to hold in the pre-construction conference. Now, again, the purpose of this section is to help LPA, PE, which is the local public agency project engineer, and the responsible charge to understand the tasks required prior to holding the pre-construction conference. So we get into project setup, pre-construction, closeout, and construction. So, project setup. A meeting is recommended to discuss and fulfill project setup tasks. Now, again, let's go back to what we had before. The project setup. Again, it's to help the local public agency engineer, the LPA, PE, and the responsible charge to understand the tasks required prior to holding the pre-construction conference. And again, you see the arrows. You have project setup, pre-construction, construction, and closeout. Now, for project setup, as we skip back, well, a meeting is going to be recommended to discuss and fulfill project setup tasks. Who? The attendees, entity responsible charge, the local public agency project engineer, and of course, they have the DOTD district project coordinator and a DOTD district lab engineer. When? Between the notice of contract execution and prior to the pre-construction conference, max of 30 days after the entity notice of contract execution. Now, to set up meeting agenda topics, there's going to be roles and responsibilities. You're going to have a review of legal documents. That's the entity state agreement, the construction contract. Then you get into CE&I topics. CE&I is construction, engineering, and inspection. So you're going to talk about the guidelines, the compliance goals. You're going to learn how to utilize the contract administration manual for construction. Then there's a sampling plan. Then you're going to deal with what we call site manager and setup. Now, site manager is basically a tool that is used for here we use it for the PEPS and technicians to do all their reports. And it should be web-based, but it's not here. Looks like it was macros based. A number of states use site manager, but you can also have a site manager who is on site. It could be a project office engineer who's setting up all the admin in the office. Then you're going to have a QA, QC materials testing certified lab. And for every type of inspection, whether you are an administrator, an inspector, or you're running a job, you need a checklist. So here we're going to talk about the pre-construction conference schedule and checklist, progress schedule and approval, inspection requirements, which under inspection requirements, we deal with the work zone and inspectors. There's a final audit checklist. And of course, there is partial estimate and change orders. Now, let's get into the roles and responsibility. Now, this is why I was telling you to get that PE. Because when you have that PE, you're in management. That's where you want to be. Now, the LPA project engineer is a licensed engineer. Here they're talking about the state of Louisiana assigned by the entity to provide contract administration for construction, engineering, and inspection. And that's in accordance with DOTD policies. That's DOTD policies. DOTD stands for Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development. course, this person is responsible for the administration of the contract in accordance with DOTD's contract administration manual. Person may be an entity, which is an engineer, employee, and that is the one who is actually working for the state or someone hired by a consultant. Then there's a responsible charge. Now, this person may be an engineer, may not. This person might not even have a license, but in retrospect, this person is a full-time local government employee that is responsible for administering, and they're also accountable for the project. Okay, the responsible charge would be like the RPR here. In Pennsylvania, we call them the IIC. In Indiana here, we call them the PEPS, the Project Engineer, Project Supervisor. They just have different names, but the tasks are the same. So the DOTD project coordinator is an engineer from the DOTD office that provides oversight for the construction project and is a resource to the LPA responsible charge person and their project engineer. Then we deal with legal documents, entity state agreement. And what that is a written signed agreement between the state and sponsoring entity, which the entity is the local public agency or an LPA, which identifies the responsibility of each party and the funding provisions for the project. It must be executed before any reimbursable work can begin. And under legal documents, construction contract is the legally binding written agreement between the entity and contractor setting forth obligations for the performance work for a specific project, specifies what is required. How do you pay for the work? Now, let's take the contract. Doesn't matter where you're working, but there's a hierarchy. And within that hierarchy, the contract is broken down to different categories. So let's take the contract. You have the contract. So under the contract, you have your standard specifications, your supplemental specifications, and your special provisions. Now, under that, then you go to your materials sampling manual, your test procedures, and your QA manuals. And then you go to your qualified products list and your, what we call your engineering and directives standards manual. Now, what do I mean by qualified products list? A list of vendors that must be approved by the state. So they're the ones that are going to probably come out to your plant, see what kind of products you have, and the products you have must meet the standards and specifications. So basically, you're the manufacturer to where the state or the contractor can order their materials from. Because when you have a manufacturer, that manufacturer must be approved, and that approval is going to be in site manager or whatever construction management program listed. And of course, before any contract is executed, all of the DBEs have to be approved. All of your manufacturers have to be approved. And here must say Buy America. That's here in Indiana. But that's what your qualified products list. Your list of products that have been approved by the state. Short and sweet. All right, let's go to parts of the contract. Again, we're dealing with the state of Louisiana, but if you think about it, most of your state DOTs are the same because everything is basically set up by the Federal Highway Administration because they actually allocate the funds to the states for projects. Now, in Louisiana, the specification book or the blue book, right now they have the 2006 edition of the Louisiana Standard Specifications for Roads and Bridges, which is the compilation of provisions and requirements for the performance of prescribed work and the basis of payment for the work approved for general application and repetitive use. Then we have the supplemental specifications. It's approved additions and revisions to the standard specifications made between publications. And that's one thing you must understand about specifications. They constantly change. Sometimes they change twice a year. So you're going to have some supplemental specifications. So remember, every specification is not set in stone and it is privy to change at any time. This is why you have the supplemental. Now, special provisions approved, they're approved additions. Again, the special provisions, approved additions and revisions to the standard specifications and supplemental specifications that initially apply only to an individual project or a small group of projects. Special provisions that are found to have statewide application to other projects may be incorporated into these supplemental specifications and standard specifications. Again, this is what Indiana prescribes. Louisiana prescribes. Now, of course, I would have to do more research into Indiana. For the most part, every state, they basically follow similar guidelines. Standard specifications, supplemental specifications, special provisions, and we also have a sampling manual that establishes and standardizes material testing and acceptance requirement for DOTD. Then, okay, something that is very important, there's a hierarchy. Because sometimes specifications, remember, they give you the minimum. But if there's a conflict between special provisions and standard plans and standard specifications, there's an order of precedence, and that is here too. And this is what Indiana has as well as Louisiana. If there is a conflict with the standard specifications, because we look at the specifications first, then what comes first are the special provisions, then the plans, then the supplemental specifications, then the standard specifications, and then the standard plans. And usually your standard plans are your standard designs. But if you're in the field, this is what you need to know, because during construction, you're going to have some conflicts. And if you understand the hierarchy, you're going to have an easier time making a decision on how to solve the conflict. Remember, order of precedence, your special provisions, plans, supplemental specifications, standard specifications, and standard plans. Compliance programs, okay. Also part of contracts, you must meet what we call a DBE goal. What is a DBE? Well, a DBE is what we call a disadvantaged business enterprise, and that's a program where the government ensures equal opportunity in transportation, contracting, markets, and they address the effects of discrimination in transportation contracting and promotes increased participation in federally funded contracts by small, socially, and economically disadvantaged businesses, including minority and women-owned business. And you can also have veteran-owned businesses in that as well. Now, the compliance program also, there's what we call a SBE, a small business element. And that was created to remedy past and current discrimination against SBE firms. The intention is to level the playing field. Notice what I said. The intention is to level the playing field for economically disadvantaged individuals wanting to do business with the DOTD on U.S. Department of Transportation federally assisted projects. The program is race neutral. Remember how much I told you this field can be a cutthroat, be a good old boys network? It could be, because even now you see more minorities, but it's still dominated by Caucasian folks, particularly when it comes to minorities of my complexion. Most of them don't go to school for engineering unless they've gone to HBCU, and even they might decide to work for the government. They might not get their own business, which is also good. You have a place to go. But when it comes to minorities, there are programs out there to try to, you're not necessarily going to eliminate discrimination, because you're going to have some people out there, depending on what region of the country you're in. And it also depends on the job, because you can actually use this type of program on private sector jobs, but your government jobs are your best for your SBEs, your VBEs, your MBEs, and your WBEs, because you're dealing with government money. And the program is a good program. Now, in some program, I think it's the DBE, I believe it's the DBE. If you make, I believe, $8 million for 3 consecutive years, you may be out of the program. Because when you are a small business, and consultants have this issue as well, where that DBE is going to get paid by what we call the primes. Works the same way with contractors. See, the primes have most of the money. Now, you're going to be on a budget. But the bottom line is to help people who are disadvantaged by the system to get their opportunities to work in transportation. That's what these programs are for, and they're good programs, utilized right. All right, let's get into the construction contract administration manual. And this is the how-to for inspection, located under the construction tab on the LADOTD webpage. And it contains detailed information on contract administration diaries, contractor payments, change orders, and final estimates. Again, you can go to any state, and you're going to find something similar. Again, site manager. I had put out 2 different versions. But we actually use Site Manager. Now, Site Manager is a program that was really established by AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. It's an electronic system that is required to manage contract information through the entire construction cycle, which includes daily work reports, DWRs, daily diaries, monthly progress payments, change orders, and the project engineer, LPA, and/or consultant and inspectors must get set up in the system at the beginning of a construction project. I've used Site Manager. I'm not going to shun it, but I will tell you from my perspective, depending on what system you're using, sometimes it crashes, sometimes it doesn't. Problem with Site Manager, it's not web-based. Now, when it becomes web-based, and I believe they're trying to make it web-based, it will be much better. Now, Site Manager is a program that the states buy. It is a lot of money. It is basically, I call it a rental program. Pay a certain amount a month. There's a lot of money, like I said. That's what Site Manager is. I know NDOT uses Site Manager. I believe TxDOT uses Site Manager. I believe the New York DOT in Michigan, they use Site Manager. It's a number of states that use the program. All right, inspection requirements. Well, for any job in construction, the inspection requirements will be on the job site during construction activities. Now, there are areas that, as an inspector, you're required to be certified, especially if you're doing concrete paving, structural concrete, Portland cement paving. You're working on embankments and base courses and at the plant. This is where your quality control comes in. And then you must understand traffic control and sampling and testing. Now, again, every state has their own certifications, but the work is similar and you must be certified. And also you need to have at least an OSHA 10 before you go out in the field to inspect. So you're going to get a lot of your certifications through training. Now, must understand this. A registered engineer is not the same as a certified inspector. Now, again, certified training for inspectors is available through LTRC. That's, of course, in Louisiana. That's their version. We have ours through NDOT. PennDOT had theirs through NDOT, PennDOT as well. Again, each DOT has its own requirements for their inspectors to become certified. Now, some certifications last 2 years, some last 5 years. But you have to recertify because specifications and technology is always changing. I know here in Indiana, you have to certify every 2 years. I know in Pennsylvania, you have to certify every 3 years. I don't know what it is in Louisiana. Now, all right, what is a registered engineer? A registered engineer is a licensed engineer. Now, a certified inspector is the one that has all the certifications. Now, this is why I told you in the beginning, here in this business, you have to find out where you're going to go. Now, to become a certified engineer, you must go to school, get at least a 4-year degree from an ABET accredited school that teaches engineering. I suggest that you take the first, because there are 2 exams that you have to take in order to be a licensed engineer. That's the fundamentals of engineering, which I suggest that you take that in school because the information is going to be fresh. So if you understand statics and mechanics of materials and engineering economics, you're going to see that on the exam. And then you have the PE, which is your what we call your practice and professional engineering exam. That's when you get the stamp once you pass it. There is reciprocity. Reciprocity means You can be licensed in more than one state. But now a certified inspector, you basically have, I call them your state DOT certifications. Now, there are other ones out there for water, quality control. But again, you're going to be an inspector, you have to be certified. And of course, they have training classes down there in Louisiana, like we had in Pennsylvania and here in Indiana. Work zone requirements that shall be provided by the contractor to patrol the project to ensure that the traffic control devices are properly placed in accordance with the traffic control plans and standards. So you must record daily documentation in Site Manager regarding traffic control. QAQC, District Lab Engineer, District Project Coordinator will assist the LPAPE in developing a sample plan, which is a list of all materials that have been sampled and all tests that have to be taken on the job. Now, listen closely on this, because there are some jobs have tests. Now, your small jobs might not, but most of your jobs have tests. Now, when I say small jobs, they could be doing a small patching job where you don't need testing at all. But when you start to get into putting down asphalt, concrete, you're going to be testing. So this is where you need to understand QA, QC. You must, as an inspector or a supervisor of the job, the contractor must supply you with a quality control plan. But here for QA, QC, the district lab engineer, district project coordinator will assist the LPAPE in developing a sampling plan, which is a list of all materials that have to be sampled and all tests that have to be taken on the job. Pre-construction conference. Purpose of this section is to help the local public agency project engineer and the responsible charge to understand the purpose of the pre-construction conference. Now, pre-construction conference establishes contract obligations and requirements of the contractor, and it identifies key personnel, contact information. We get timing after the contract has been awarded and the entity notice of contract execution, known as NOC, has been sent to the entity responsible charge, and the LPAPE will schedule within 30 days. There is an NTP, which is a notice to proceed, must be set within 30 days of the NOC. The NOC, again, is the entity notice of contract execution. It's the entity notice of contract execution, known as NOC. The agenda, completion of the pre-construction checklist. The construction. Purpose of this section is to help the LPA project engineer and responsible charge understand their roles in inspection, testing, cost control, documentation, and to successfully submit partial estimates and change orders. And let's continue. Let's go back up. All right. The LPA PE construction task. All documentation must follow that is shown in the construction contract administration manual. The link is right there. You can copy it down. But if you're in Louisiana and you work for the Louisiana Department of Transportation, you have all the information. Now, excuse the dates. The dates are very, very, very old, but what I'm doing is giving you an overview of what goes on in the administering of transportation construction projects. Now, remember, all the items to be paid should be measured and documented in both field books, spreadsheets, and Site Manager. A detailed estimate in Site Manager must be prepared monthly whether work is performed or not. Now, again, each state is different. We require every 15 days. But the contractor gets a check every 30 days. Remember that. Now, we here in Indiana, we use field books to actually get an idea of what operation is going and the quantity, and then we just transfer the operation to site manager. And you should have an inspection checklist when you're out here as well. It's very important because you need to know what's going on within this project. A number of individuals are out there and they look like a deer in headlights because they did not look at the plans, they didn't look at the specifications. I know when I asked them, I said, well, what test are you taking? What's the frequency? And it's not to pull the got you, it's to see what they know. Because you get a number of individuals who are very new on the project. And if you're going to give newbies projects, give them small projects so they can understand the paperwork and they build confidence. If you give them a project that they're not ready for, they're going to fail. And they may end up quitting your organization because they're overwhelmed. Be realistic, start them with something small. All right, construction task for the LPA-PE. Responsible for obtaining all necessary samples and performing lists in the field must have a certified inspector to assist them. All sampling and testing must be performed in accordance with the DOTD materials sampling manual and or sampling plan of the project. Tasks. The project will have to be built in accordance with the contract, which includes the DOTD Louisiana standard specifications for roads and bridges, special provisions, supplemental specifications, and plans. And all required DBE and SBE forms are completed in accordance with the DOTD compliance programs requirements as outlined in the DBE SBE contract provisions, i.e. monthly DBE SBE participation / CP-1A form. And the task for the DOTD project coordinator, make periodic inspections of the work, varies based on project scope and complexity. Document the inspection. Will not issue instructions to the contractor, superintendent, foreman, or any of his personnel, nor direct work in a manner other than advising the entity's project personnel that the contractor's work does not conform to plans and or specs. The OTD provides an oversight for FHWA. Again, when you're out there inspecting, it's not the job of an inspector to give the contractor means and methods. The inspector is there to oversee the contract to make sure that the work is being done according to plans and specifications. And you must document all of your information accurately. Why? Because in addition to the state auditing your job, the FHWA will also audit the job because they want to make sure that the money has been spent right. That's why. So when it comes to all these federal projects and state projects, it's a lot of documentation. That's why you have to be good at keeping records and organized. Okay, the DOTD project coordinator task, review the first partial estimate in site manager after notification that it is complete. You advise the LPA project engineer or LPA inspector of any noted construction deficiencies and unacceptable methods of written records, documentation, and you provide technical assistance to answer questions. Of course, construction documentation. We deal with project diaries, DWRs, and site manager. The diaries shall be written and kept by the PE and inspectors on a daily basis through the duration of the project and record the work done each day with quantities, equipment, and personnel on the project, as well as weather conditions and whether a contract day was charged. DWRs begin on the NTP date, which NTP is notice to proceed. All entries should be accurate and thorough. Diaries are important, especially if a claim or lawsuit arises, maybe years later. With proper documentation, you have to go to a deposition, can be a savior against a claim. Most important, failure to supply the required documentation as per DOTD policies will result in either a delay in reimbursement or possible withdrawal of funding that is federal. That, again, that's possible. Fail to supply the required documentation as per the DOTD policies. Again, failure to supply the required documentation as per DOTD policies will result in either a delay in reimbursement or possible withdrawal of federal funding, and that should the matter not be resolved in a timely manner. This is a requirement, not an option. This will be covered throughout the day. Measurement of the work. The OPA PE and his inspectors are responsible for measuring on a daily basis work that has been completed. Documentation of the items and quantities, they're in a field book and or spreadsheet, and then entered into site manager for paid purposes. You know, if you keep a field book as well, that's also a legal document. So if you make a mistake in your field book, cross it out and initial it. Because you're at a deposition and you don't have site manager and you have organized notes, well, you have a legal document that you can present to the court, and that can make you or break you, depending on how organized and how understanding you are of the specifications, the plans, the special provisions, and how good you are with writing. When you do a report, you don't need to put a bunch of fluff in the report. You need your location. That's very important. We already talked about the weather, the day. You need the day, like Tuesday, the month. You need all of that information. And if there's an occurrence, you write the time that an occurrence took place, such as a crash being on site. If there is traffic control that's not compliant, put it in your field book. That's what you have to do as an inspector. Most people think you just go out there and you just measure everything. Yes, you do measure for quantities, but you're watching for traffic control. You have to keep the site safe. And you also have to oversee that the contractor is following standards and specifications. Now, why is all this important? Because if the contractor is not in compliance, the contractor is basically breaching a contract that he or she signed. So it's basically your job, the inspector or the inspector in charge of the PE or PS, oversee the contract. Number one, to make sure that the money is being spent properly. And number two, that the contractor is building a quality project. Remember, taxpayers, they pay for these projects. You don't want to deal with a lot of angry citizens. Sometimes you have to communicate with citizens. You have to make sure that you are organized and you pay attention to detail when writing reports. Construction payment, partial estimate. developed each month by the LPA, PE, and site manager regardless of work activity. Once the partial estimate has been approved by DOTD, the entity will be issued a check to reimburse them for the percentage specified in the entity state agreement for the partial estimate amount. Payment. The sponsoring entity is responsible by law for paying the contractor correctly and on time, and that's within 30 days, for work performed on a monthly basis. Now we get into construction documentation, starting with change orders. Any changes to the plans or specifications will require a change order. So the LPAPE is responsible for writing all change orders and submitting them for approval. So every change order should have all headings addressed. And in that change order, you need project description, justification, items, costs, specifications, attachments, and funding. And of course, when we get into change orders, the entity is listed as the contractor. The DOTD is the owner, and the contractor is not represented in site manager. So the contractor's concurrence with the change order is denoted by the contractor's signature on a printed draft, scan, and that's a copy that is scanned. Again, the contractor's occurrence with the change order is denoted by the contractor's signature on a printed draft copy scan as an attachment to the change order using Content Manager. Authorization or approval is set up for each change order separately in Site Manager and will always include a DOTD representative. Now, before I go on, remember, these slides, I'm just giving you an overview on how everything is administered for a construction project from the administrative side of the inspector and the PEPS and everybody who gets involved with ensuring that the contractor is being paid on time and the contractor is not breaching the contract, so there's compliance. And I'm giving you this information because a lot of it is out of date. This PowerPoint goes all the way back to at least 2010 or 2011. So things have changed in the last 13 to 14 years. As I continue, the Form 2059 report, completed sampling plan showing all testing and sampling that has been taken and resolution for any failing tests. Form 2059 report is submitted by the LPAPE to the DOTD district lab engineer for acceptance, approved by the district lab. Now, again, this is how Louisiana does it. And contract documentation submitted by the LPAPE within 30 days of the final acceptance and includes a Form 2059 report, completed final estimate, as-built drawing signed by the LPAPE, and of course, field books. Okay, the DOTD project coordinator task. Verify conformity with first estimate involving DBE work, reviewing the Form CP-1A if applicable, as outlined in the DBE SBE contract provisions. Review payrolls. Payrolls are certified payrolls with the LPA project engineer for conformity with the first estimate. Attend any meeting requested by the LPA responsible charge or LPA project engineer. And the responsible charge construction task. You should know about the project scope, schedule, status, and budget. You do not have to be in the field every day if you have a CE&I consultant. Again, if you're the responsible, you don't have to be in the field every day if you have a CE&I consultant, but you need to be able to answer project status questions if called by DOTD. Claims. DOTD has established claims procedure EDSM 3.1.128 that involves an independent evaluation of the claim at the DOTD headquarters construction level. So if a contractor's claim is not resolved at the LPA project engineer's level or the DOTD project coordinator's level, the unresolved claim can be forwarded to the DOTD headquarters construction section, who will provide an opinion of how DOTD would handle the claim to the LPA for them to resolve. And most important, failure to supply the required documentation will result either a delay in reimbursement or possible withdrawal of federal funding should the matter not be resolved in a timely manner. This is a requirement, not an option. I mentioned that earlier. And let's move on to project closeout. Project closeout is to help the local public agency, project engineer, and the responsible charge understand the documentation requirements to successfully close out a project. Again, the purpose of this section is to help the local public agency engineer and responsible charge understand the documentation requirements to successfully close out a project. And the task, final inspection. The responsible charge, LPA, PE, shall set up a final inspection and acceptance meeting for the project when it is complete, which includes the contractor, the responsible charge, and DOTD. Final acceptance, the entity must pass a resolution accepting the project before DOTD can accept the project. And LPA PE closeout task, notify DOTD of project completion, schedule final inspection, prepare the final estimate package, and hand deliver with all backup documentation to the DOTD project coordinator to review. And finally, attend the project final inspection, provide guidance to the, and this is what the DOTD project coordinator has to do after the information from the LPA project engineer is accepted by the DOTD. And they have to attend the final inspection, provide guidance to the LPA project engineer to prepare the final estimate package, review the final estimate package with backup documentation. Again, going back to the previous slide, what happens? The LPA, they're always going to notify DOTD of a final project completion, and they're going to schedule the final inspection. And the LPA PE, they will prepare the final estimate, and they're going to submit that. I call it submitting, not hand delivering it. We don't do that anymore. We submit it up through some type of electronic project management system. So the LPA PE, what he's going to do or she's going to do is deliver it to the DOTD project coordinator for review. And once the DOTD project coordinator reviews it, everything, they're going to attend the final inspection, provide guidance to the LPA project engineer to prepare the final estimate package, review the final estimate package with backup documentation. And we have come to the end. So basically, what I'm giving you is information on how you manage transportation projects. Now, again, what I showed you was Louisiana, how they did it in the past. Now, they've probably updated all their technology since then, but you're getting an overview. And basically, all states do it on a similar basis. The bottom line is to properly manage the money that the government allocates to all the state DOTs. And that's it for this topic on construction engineering and inspection. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're looking for some political content, check out my main channel, the 411 Talk Zone Radio Show channel. Now, here's where you can find me on both channels. Now, I do the 401 Talk Zone Radio Show channel every Wednesday and the QCIS channel every Thursday. I shouldn't say every, but most of the time on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Now, on the 401 Talk Zone Radio Show, once all my videos are recorded, not only do they get uploaded to YouTube, they also get uploaded to X, formerly Twitter, Rumble, and to social. And for the QCIS channel, videos get uploaded to YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn. Once again, thank you for viewing this content from the QCIS channel. On this channel, you get a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious evening.